All right, welcome to Comfortably Uncomfortable. You've got Sandy and Alex here, and we are here to empower women to choose courage over comfort by getting comfortably uncomfortable. We get real and cut through the bullshit. Are you ready to get a little weird? Because we're going to laugh, sweat, cry, and grow together.
No topic is going to be TMI. Well, maybe for me, but not for Sandy. We complement each other in that way. Okay, so are we ready?
Well, yeah, duh, I am, but are you?
Okay, let's go. The one with the guilt. So we're big fans of Brene Brown and all things that she says. So I thought maybe today, Sandy, we'll start with her quick definition.
I love her, so bring it on.
Yes. And this goes back to our episode on shame. We talked a little bit about this, so I'm going to bring shame in here too. So because it's a nice comparison. Shame is a focus on self. Guilt is a focus on behavior. Shame is I am bad. Guilt is I did something bad. And for me, immediately what comes to mind when I think of the word guilt, especially with our listeners here, is mom guilt. But my question for you is, do you think that that's even the right word to use? Because in my mind, it's more of like, well, that's an easier word to say maybe, or like it sounds better, but it's really more mom shame. And I think there's a jealousy component too that comes in.
I mean, honestly, I think it's a combination of all three. I mean, we interchange shame, guilt, jealousy, and we muck them up. And It could be one day could be shame. One action could be evoking shame and guilt, and another action can evoke jealousy, guilt, and shame, all three. So I think, yes, we've termed like guilt as like go-to term. But I definitely think like your distinction and Brene Brown's distinction, and a lot of psychologists really, of trying to separate the three, shame, guilt, jealousy, to help us as individuals identify what we're experiencing.
Yeah.
Because if we're identifying what we experience, then we can kind of figure out what to do about it. I mean, in our shame episode, we really talked about naming the shame, shifting it, and then taking that action and going and rewriting your story. Guilt, like you said, for me, this idea of guilt and doing something wrong, what's interesting about it, and this can pertain to mommy guilt too, is the action in itself may not be wrong. It may just evoke hurt feelings of the other party.
Yeah.
Because in itself, it's like what I'm doing, I don't think it's wrong, ethically wrong, morally wrong, or whatever, but it's still evoked feeling. And because you have empathy, you then realize and have guilt that you might have hurt another person, or that, like I said, like as a mommy, whatever action you did, you're like, oh, shoot, because it really is dependent on the experience, or dependent on that to like categorize it as shame or guilt or jealousy.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a really, really good point. And Maddie talked so much about it, to your point of shifting the shame, but shifting it into guilt so that you can do something about it. Right.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that's where like the distinction between like your own internal perception of who you are, and having shame because you're feeling unworthy, or you're not, because I think it's like there's some people, I mean, narcissists are actually a category of people who don't really feel guilt, but have immense feelings of shame. Because if they have immense feeling of shame, they're only thinking about themselves and how they're perceived or how they are viewed, but don't actually feel guilty of how it's affecting others. So that idea of guilt, like that's where it's like guilt may not be a bad thing, because again, the intention, right? If you're going to say something hurtful, you still might have feelings of guilt, but then the intention is there. But again, if you have no intention on hurting anybody, but then you do something or you say something, you gossip or whatever, that can evoke, feelings of guilt because you have empathy, because you see how it affected the other person.
Yeah. I
And
never
I
really
think that's
understood that there's a difference between the two. They are used so interchangeably. And I
oh,
think
so
until
much.
doing all
Yeah.
these podcasts, I didn't think of it differently. But I think it helps me so much to understand, like, if I yell at my kids and I feel bad about it, I can apologize to
Yeah.
them. I feel guilty
Yeah.
and I can apologize for that.
Yep, and that can prevent you from downward spiraling and going into this like, I'm an unworthy mother, I'm a
Mhm.
bad mom, I don't deserve to have these children, I yelled at him,
Yeah.
whatever that is. It's
Right.
like you got
Right.
yourself out of the shame and into the guilt, which I can see why some psychologists are like, no, we want to go from shame to guilt.
Yeah.
Yet I always bring up of like that like mommy guilt or even just guilt in general of like what happens when you are being you, you're not intending to hurt somebody, but that person does evoke, hurt feelings, yet you're not necessarily going to change your behavior, right? Because
Well,
like you
then
didn't really do anything wrong.
I think that introduces a little jealousy into the picture. I mean,
Interesting. Okay.
when we were having this conversation, um, getting a bit comfortably uncomfortable here, I brought up the word jealousy because I think it's very much like the shame of maybe not living up to someone else's version of motherhood. Like you're a constant comparison, right? But it's not so much that I think I'm a bad mom. It's I'm jealous that they have done this thing so well and I haven't. Or,
Yeah.
I was saying that I think it can go both ways if you're a working parent being jealous of a stay-at-home parent or a stay-at-home parent being jealous of a working parent that, gets to leave. And I have this thought every once in a while, like I kind of have this in between thing, but I work so that because I just don't think I can spend all those hours all day with my kids. And it
Yeah.
makes me feel bad that like I
Right.
don't think I can handle that. I mean, I know I can't. It makes me go bananas. I need that time. But I'm jealous of women who they have that energy, they have that interest in spending all day with their kids, but I don't need to feel shame about that. But I find it so intertwined, especially with moms and all the pressure that life puts on us with our kids.
Well, you bring up a really good, like, it's a great example of what you brought up of this idea of like, it can be all feelings at once. And we don't
Yeah.
always compartmentalize because at some point, like, we can't compartmentalize. We try and do that as like mommy at work, mommy, kids, wife,
Yeah.
sister, like, all these
Right.
roles. And we're like, oh, we're going to compartmentalize them.
Right.
So that'll keep it clean. Where in reality, we live in a messy, uncomfortable, comfortably uncomfortable life.
Yep.
We're
Yep.
gonna intertwine. What I think you brought up was this idea of idealization. So the
Yeah.
jealousy comes to where we're having this idealization, the way we view other people, like the social media lens, right? We
Right.
see the like highlight reel and then we immediately go
Mhm.
to these, categories of shame and guilt and jealousy. And at the end of the day, as simple as it is, it's like comparison is the destroyer of happiness or of joy because
Yeah.
we that's how we hold each other of like where we land on the ladder of success. So this idealization brings up that fact that I know that people hated every stage of being a parent or
Yeah.
being a newlywed or like insert whatever category. It's like,
Right.
pregnancy they hated. Then early infants, some other people are like, oh my gosh, I love being pregnant, but I hated the early infant stage.
Right.
And
Right.
again, it's this thing of like we compare and that's how we get our measure of worth or how we're doing. It's like how you compare like, oh, I'm doing okay as a insert XYZ because look at them
Right.
over there.
Right.
And
Right.
I think that's because we are conditioned. I mean, we are
Mhm.
conditioned from a young age to be compared,
Right. Yeah.
and that's going to evoke feelings of shame and guilt
Mhm.
and jealousy. And I don't necessarily have the answer because I just have more questions.
Right.
But if we can
We need to get Maddie
distinguish,
back. We have
I
too
know,
many
right?
questions.
the more questions I have, the more questions I have.
I know.
Um, but it's to help distinguish like really feeling and getting intact.
Yeah.
Because the thing when you brought up guilt, I was like, oh no, we're going to talk about guilt is, and I've talked about this just the other day in a phone conversation of like, what happens when, and I brought this up a little bit earlier of like, so I didn't do anything wrong, or I've even been on the other side of this of like somebody didn't do anything wrong, right? They didn't mean the intention. I knew that they were just being them, yet it hurt my feelings.
Right.
And I could tell that they saw that it hurt my feelings. So if they have empathy and they're a narcissist, they're gonna feel guilty.
Right.
But we are in a society, I think, I mean, tell me if I am completely wackadoodle, which is probably true, but like
Sometimes.
if anyone's feelings get hurt, it's like we have to apologize.
Right.
And
Mhm.
I'm not against apologizing. Obviously, I teach my 6-year-old to like apologize. Yet
Yeah.
it is a struggle of like, how do I help her, help me
Yeah.
teach, apologize, but not necessarily say that like I'm sorry for what I did. It's more of like, I'm sorry those evoked those feelings for you, and you're allowed to have that
Right.
space to feel those feelings. Yet I'm not going to change what I do. Right. Like,
And yeah, and not to kind of put fuel on the fire of that, but women just apologize over
stupid
over
shit. Stupid.
yeah, like just over apologize, I guess is what I'm saying. And we need to stop. Like you don't need to be sorry for doing things that make you happy or put your family first or and people can
Mm-hmm.
feel the way that they want to feel, but if it's weighing on you doing things that make you happy, but it's hurting someone else, if that's weighing on you, then maybe that person just shouldn't be in your life. Like, not to be, I don't know if that's too dramatic, but like, I think we need to just stop apologizing for being happy. And like,
Yeah. I mean,
I don't
one of the
know.
examples I love, Glennon Doyle's in her book Untamed. She talked
Yes, I
about
love that book.
the drawbridge, and like
Okay. I
that's
don't remember that.
because so the drawbridge was they live on their island, and
Oh,
so
yeah,
they're
yeah,
not doing
yeah.
any actions. Yeah, they're not doing any actions to like physically or emotionally intentionally hurt people, right? Because that's not
Mhm.
we're not in the business of that. Of like, no,
Right.
always be
Right.
kind.
Right.
If there are things that, case in point, the people in our lives, we like, because we have the empathy, we know it's going to probably hurt their feelings or they're not going to be okay with it. So like
Right.
I like talk about like guilt. Grew up with Catholic guilt. Are you kidding
Yep.
me? Like that could be a whole nother episode.
Yep.
Yet like, sure, visual was what helped me, for visual of like this drawbridge of like I am protecting my
Mhm.
island, and I am accepting and knowing that I'm not doing anything to outwardly, intentionally, physically, emotionally hurt
Yeah.
anyone.
Yeah.
I'm only going to bring that drawbridge down and welcome those people to my island who, like, you're allowed to have hurt feelings, right? What I do could evoke those feelings for you. But in a
Mhm.
way, Glenn Doyle obviously says it much better than I do, but in a way, it was kind of like, but zip it up. And if you want to
Right.
be in my island, like, get on board, right?
This is
Because,
the island. This is what's happening here. And it doesn't
yep,
have to suit everyone. It's not
yep.
everyone's cup of tea, but that's why it's your island and no one
Mm-hmm.
else's. And you bring joy to that island. I mean, that was from the burnout book too. Like the solution to burnout is finding purpose and joy for
Yeah.
yourself.
It's so hard. Like, it's so hard for me. Like, I'm struggling right now, obviously, with lots of things, but one in particular is this idea of letting my parents down, right? So, like, me getting
Mhm. I feel
divorced,
that.
I'm the one person in my family, like, not just like my immediate family, but like my whole cousins and everything, to
Mhm.
get divorced.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah, it's a lot to
talk about the shame, and then like
yeah.
feeling guilty of like me letting my parents down, and then like how I am managing and moving forward with my life now. Like, I'm making different choices,
Mhm.
and I know in particular like my mom may not fully agree with me, and I know that it hurts her feelings, and so then I have evoked feelings of guilt because it's like, oh, I know I hurt her. Yet
Yeah.
like managing those like conversations and saying like, Mom, I love you. I'm not wanting to hurt you, you know. So this guilt that I'm feeling, it's like, I'm not going to change my behavior, yet having that conversation of
Yeah.
allowing both of us to have the space of those feelings, I
Mm-hmm.
think it was the turning point. And then me
Absolutely.
saying like, look, like, I want to pull my drop down so you can come onto my island with
Mm-hmm.
me. But if not, like, I have to draw it up and you have to stay on the other side, because it won't
Yeah.
be good for both of us. Because then it'll just be this constant like guilt, shame, guilt, shame, guilt, shame
Yeah.
cycle, but fully aware that like I'm doing what I need to do for me. And
Yeah.
in this stage of my life, knowing that like she has no, I mean, she can't. She got married young. She's still married. And like
Mm-hmm.
we've even talked about it of like times where she's like, you know, she even told me, she was like, are you mad that I never left your father? And I was like, no. But there was definitely moments in their marriage that I realized of like,
Yeah.
oh, like that wasn't good either. Like that was
Right.
tough, right?
Right. Right.
You
For
learned from
you.
that. And I had to do what I needed to do in mine. Yet I get that she won't ever understand what it's like to be 33, a single mom and divorced. And so
Right.
sometimes her advice is, it just like,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's like we might sit with these feelings of guilt and can't do much anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
But the only thing we can do is just like accept that like we love each other, it's not being
Mm-hmm.
done on purpose, and that it's
Mm-hmm.
for each other's preservation of
Right.
all the things.
Well, I think that's so important. And I applaud you for having those hard conversations. Like, first recognizing it and then actually doing it are two completely different animals. And I understand very deeply how difficult that is. And I mean, and I think all like, we see this, advice in different places, or we've received advice in different places, but it always seems to be like, sit with it, recognize it, and
Mhm.
then like take those steps. And yeah.
Of being comfortably uncomfortable, you're going to have to sit in what I call the dirty water and have those conversations and know that you can't really wrap it. The guilt is there because you have empathy and you're understanding that somebody else has hurt feelings. Now, if you didn't mean intention, you change your behavior, like by all means, that's what guilt is there for, is to help you understand how you can change your behavior to not hurt somebody's feelings. It's okay if they mix. It's okay that you have guilt with it.
Right. I like the idea of boundaries as another episode.
To
Yeah.
be continued, y'all. Boundaries coming
Yeah.
up next.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for showing up today. Getting awkward is always more fun with friends. Give us a review, tag us, and share us so we can continue to grow together.
Use hashtag CUPod, letter C, letter U, or tag us. You can find Sandy on Instagram at sweatandshineon and Alex at aj.afterbabyfit on Instagram and afterbabyfit on Facebook and YouTube. We'll see you next time.